Hello brothers and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. Some scars aren't worn on the skin, they're worn in the way you never ask anyone for help again. Most people think Sigma males are just lone wolves by choice, mysterious, cool, unbothered. But here's a brutal fact. According to psychological research, early emotional neglect is one of the strongest predictors of hyper-independence in adulthood. Translation: the "I don't need anyone" vibe didn't just happen. It was engineered through years of silent wars they fought as kids. While everyone was busy labeling them gifted or quiet, nobody noticed they were building invisible armor thicker than a medieval castle wall. Today, we're not just scratching the surface. We're going straight into the basement where all the unspoken battles and buried landmines still hum beneath the Sigma male's calm exterior. And don't worry, it's not going to be one of those sad violin sob stories either. Think of it more like finally reading the user manual for a mind that's been running 10 secret apps at once since age 6. Let's get into the trauma nobody talks about, but every Sigma male knows like the back of his battle-scarred hand. Number 1, being low maintenance wasn't a trait, it was a survival strategy. When people say a Sigma male is low maintenance, they usually say it like it's a compliment, like he's just this easygoing, no-problem, stress-free kind of guy. What they don't realize is that being low maintenance wasn't a personality choice, it was a survival move. Growing up, Sigma males learned very early that needing things from people was dangerous. It meant waiting. It meant disappointment. It meant opening yourself up just to get shut down, ignored, or used. So somewhere along the way, they made a silent vow. Don't need too much, and you won't get hurt too much. As a kid, when they needed comfort, they got lectures. When they needed encouragement, they got indifference. When they needed support, they got a heavy helping of deal with it yourself. So instead of asking and getting bruised over and over, they learned how to shrink their needs to the size of a pinhead. They learned how to self-soothe, to self-motivate, to self-everything. To the outside world, it looked like maturity. In reality, it was emotional self-defense dressed up like independence. That's why a Sigma male can sit in chaos and never call for help. That's why he can endure loneliness like it's a Tuesday afternoon. That's why he seems so damn unbothered by things that would send most people into full-blown crisis mode. It's not because he doesn't feel. It's because he trained himself to believe his feelings were his responsibility and no one else's problem. Asking for help still feels like speaking a foreign language he never fully learned. Even when people offer, it's not easy to accept. A small part of him is always wondering, what's the catch? Because back when he did rely on others, the help usually came with guilt trips, strings attached, or worse, a debt that never got paid off. It's a strange kind of sadness that sits under the surface of every Sigma male, the knowledge that he doesn't expect much from others, not because he's above them, but because he stopped believing anyone could handle the weight of his real needs a long time ago. Being low maintenance isn't about pride. It's about survival scars that grew so thick they started to look like strength. And honestly, it works until it doesn't. Because even the strongest lone wolves sometimes need shelter. But by the time they admit it, they've already taught everyone else they don't. Number 2, they were expected to be adults before they even knew how to be kids. They were expected to carry the emotional weight of an entire household before they even understood what emotions really were. Sigma males didn't get the luxury of being messy, loud, curious kids like everyone else. They were handed invisible armor and told, without words, that their job was to be the steady one, the fixer, the responsible one. While other kids were being told bedtime stories, they were busy trying to calm down an angry parent, decode an unpredictable household, or figure out how to make sure nobody exploded over dinner. The saddest part is nobody ever asked them if they were okay. Nobody ever wondered if the calm one was actually terrified inside. They just assumed that because he wasn't throwing tantrums or acting out, he must be fine. In reality, he was bottling up more confusion, fear, and sadness than he knew what to do with. He learned fast that there was no space for his breakdowns, no room for his feelings. His only job was to be the emotional anchor, even when he was the one drowning. This is the kind of pressure that doesn't leave obvious scars, but it leaves marks that never really fade. It teaches a Sigma male to distrust his own needs, to swallow them down so deep that after a while even he forgets they're there. It creates a man who seems endlessly patient, endlessly strong, but underneath that, there's a boy who never got to just be a boy. No tantrums, no loud cries for attention, no running wild without the weight of the world on his back. By the time he's grown, he's a master at staying composed in chaos. But that composure was built in the middle of emotional battlefields he never signed up for. He wasn't born cold or distant. He was trained to be that way because the people around him needed someone to be the adult. And he was the easiest target. It's not wisdom that made him mature early. It was survival. And while that survival shaped him into someone incredible, it also stole something he can never really get back. The right to be vulnerable without fear of being punished for it. Number 3, punished for being too observant. Growing up, Sigma males had a radar that picked up on everything people thought they were hiding. The lies, the contradictions, the silent deals no one talked about. They could see right through fake smiles, broken promises, and all the unspoken tension in a room. But instead of being celebrated for their clarity, they got hit with a different message: stay quiet, stay blind, stay polite. The moment they opened their mouths and called out what they saw, they weren't seen as smart or perceptive. They were labeled troublemakers, disrespectful, or even ungrateful. It didn't matter how right they were. It didn't matter that they were exposing real problems that everyone else pretended didn't exist. The truth made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people shoot the messenger. So they learned fast. Telling the truth didn't get you medals. It got you isolated. It got you guilt-tripped. It got you punished. Not because you were wrong, but because you refused to play dumb like everyone else. That's the painful irony Sigma males carry with them. They grew up in environments where honesty was supposedly a virtue, but only if it didn't threaten the fragile ego of the people around them. So they became experts at seeing everything and saying nothing. They stopped pointing out the hypocrisy, not because they stopped noticing it, but because they realized there was no reward for it, only backlash. Over time, this teaches them a brutal kind of self-restraint. They stop wasting energy trying to correct the lies around them and start focusing on building their own private world where honesty actually matters. They don't argue anymore. They don't try to prove themselves. They just silently distance themselves, cutting ties without ceremony or drama. If you ask them why they're so detached, they won't even explain. Because explaining would mean trusting someone to care about the truth. And they've learned the hard way that most people don't want the truth. They want comfort. So that sharp mind that once tried to fix things now gets used for something else. Creating a life where they don't have to apologize for seeing things exactly as they are. It's not bitterness. It's not arrogance. It's the survival instinct of someone who got punished too many times just for having eyes that actually worked. Number 4, they had to parent their own parents. For Sigma males, emotional intelligence wasn't a gift they got to grow into. It was a job they got stuck with way too early. They weren't taught how to process their own feelings because they were too busy managing everyone else's. They became the unofficial therapist, mediator, problem solver, all while still trying to figure out basic things like math homework and how to survive middle school. Instead of being comforted when the world felt too big, they were the ones doing the comforting, talking down a hysterical parent or patching up fights between adults who should have known better. They learned how to read moods like other kids learned how to ride bikes. A certain sigh from their mother meant she was slipping into sadness again. A certain slam of the door meant their father was 2 minutes away from throwing a rage fit. Sigma males didn't get childhoods filled with safety and simplicity. They got crash courses in crisis management. And the crazy part is, the adults around them often acted like it was perfectly normal, even praising them for being so mature for their age, completely blind to the fact that this so-called maturity was just masked exhaustion. Handling adult problems as a kid leaves a mark you can't scrub off. Sigma males grow up hyper-independent because they learned the hard way that if they didn't step up, things around them would fall apart. They carry a constant, low-key pressure to fix everything, even when it's not their responsibility anymore. They feel guilty for wanting to focus on their own needs because deep down they were trained to believe that taking care of themselves was selfish when there were bigger fires to put out. This is why Sigma males often have this strange mix of wisdom and weariness. They're the ones who can walk into a room and instantly sense what's broken, in the atmosphere, in people, in the energy. But instead of rushing to fix it, they pull back now. They learn that fixing people doesn't heal you, it drains you. And when you've been emotionally wrung out since childhood, you don't have the luxury to waste energy on anyone who isn't willing to meet you halfway. It's not coldness. It's the aftermath of carrying responsibilities no child should ever have been handed in the first place. Number 5. The guilt of outgrowing their families. Started early. Growing up, Sigma males could feel it in their bones. They were wired differently from the people around them. While their families were tangled in petty dramas, clinging to outdated beliefs, or chasing approval from people who didn't even matter, the Sigma mind was already stretching, questioning, and quietly stepping away from all of it. They could see the holes in the thinking that surrounded them. They could feel the limits being placed on them that didn't make any real sense. And even as young kids, part of them knew they weren't going to stay trapped in that world forever. But knowing you're different doesn't come without its own kind of pain. Sigma males felt guilty for it, even though it wasn't something they chose. It's the weird emotional tug-of-war nobody talks about. Loving your family but realizing you can't stay mentally small just to make them comfortable. They felt like traitors in their own homes, guilty for dreaming bigger, questioning deeper, and refusing to settle for the small lives being modeled in front of them. It wasn't about thinking they were better. It was about realizing they were meant for something different and feeling the silent shame of it. That guilt wasn't always loud, but it was always there, like a weight they couldn't explain. Every time they understood a situation better than the adults around them, every time they saw a smarter, sharper path but stayed silent to avoid rocking the boat, the guilt grew. Because part of them thought, if I really loved them, shouldn't I be more like them? Shouldn't I want what they want? But no matter how hard they tried, the smallness of that environment kept feeling tighter, like a sweater 2 sizes too small they were expected to wear forever. Over time, Sigma males learned to carry that guilt without letting it cripple them. They realize outgrowing the people who raised you isn't a betrayal, it's survival, it's self-respect. But that early emotional wiring still makes it complicated. Even when they break free physically, part of them still wrestles with a quiet sadness. The knowledge that evolution sometimes demands separation, and that loyalty to your own growth will sometimes look and feel like disloyalty to the ones you used to call home. Number 6, they were forced to wear masks just to survive. From the moment they could comprehend the dynamics of their environment, Sigma males learned a brutal truth. Being themselves wasn't safe. In a world where showing vulnerability or authenticity could result in rejection, criticism, or outright punishment, they quickly adapted by constructing masks. These weren't just mere facades. They were carefully stitched together to ensure survival. The polite mask allowed them to blend into situations where conflict or attention would have been disastrous. The agreeable mask kept them out of harm's way, ensuring that they wouldn't rock the boat and risk being abandoned or ridiculed. And perhaps, most devastatingly, the invisible mask made them fade into the background, ensuring they were neither a target for scrutiny nor a source of discomfort for others. These masks weren't just worn out of habit, they were a matter of emotional survival. For a Sigma male, being real was a risk that often came with consequences they weren't willing to face. The problem with these masks, however, is that after years of wearing them, it becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish where the mask ends and the real person begins. What started as a survival tactic becomes an ingrained way of interacting with the world. The fear of being exposed, of being vulnerable, of being rejected, it's all locked behind the layers of politeness, agreeableness, and invisibility. Over time, the emotional toll is immense. They may appear calm, collected, and detached, but beneath the surface, the constant effort of maintaining these masks drains them. They start to lose touch with who they truly are. Who were they before the masks? It becomes a distant memory, fading under the weight of years spent hiding in plain sight. They've been so busy surviving that they've forgotten how to live authentically. The irony? The more they disguise themselves to fit in, the more alone they feel, because no one ever truly sees the person behind the mask. Number 7, they were taught love was transactional. Sigma males didn't grow up believing that love was this safe, unconditional thing you could count on. They were taught, directly or indirectly, that love had a price tag and you had to constantly work to pay it. Maybe it was through being the perfect student, the peacemaker, the kid who didn't cause problems. Maybe it was through making themselves useful, taking care of others, being good, even when it crushed their spirit. Either way, the message was clear. Love wasn't a given. It was a reward for good behavior, and you could lose it at any second if you didn't measure up. This twisted reality made Sigma males hyper-aware of every move they made. They learned to scan the room, read people's moods, predict what was expected of them before anyone said a word. It wasn't about being naturally obedient. It was survival mode. Keep people happy, meet their expectations, stay useful, or get punished with coldness, guilt trips, or outright rejection. Over time, this constant pressure hardwired a belief deep inside them. You are only as lovable as your latest performance. Even as adults, Sigma males carry the residue of this toxic lesson. They struggle to believe people can love them for who they are, not what they do. They stay emotionally guarded because a part of them is still waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to say, "You're not enough anymore, you don't deserve my care anymore." That fear doesn't come from paranoia, it comes from lived experience. Because of this, Sigma males tend to underplay their needs and over-deliver in relationships. They'll give endlessly without asking for much in return, partly because they're afraid of being seen as too much or too demanding. They don't want to risk being abandoned for having human needs. They've been programmed to believe that asking for love without earning it first is selfish. And selfishness, in their mind, is a sin that gets you cut off. At their core, Sigma males aren't cold or distant because they don't care. They're fiercely loyal once they trust you. But getting to that point is rare because their childhood taught them a brutal rule: if love isn't earned, it's not real. And unlearning that rule, that's a lifelong battle most people will never even realize they're fighting. Number 8, they were gaslighted into thinking their dreams were unrealistic. Sigma males learned early that dreaming big wasn't just seen as ambitious. It was often met with mockery, doubt, or outright condemnation. They had big ideas, the kind that stretched beyond the boundaries of their environment, beyond what anyone around them could even imagine. But instead of being encouraged or even mildly supported, they were gaslighted into thinking their dreams were absurd. The people who were supposed to nurture them turned their ambitions into jokes, calling them unrealistic, too idealistic, or simply too much. What they saw as potential, others saw as a threat to their comfort zone. Their dreams didn't fit into the mold of what was considered acceptable, so they were told they were being ungrateful for wanting more than what they had been given. It wasn't just a slight against their goals, it was a direct hit to their sense of self. To dream big in that environment was to disrupt the status quo, and people didn't like that. If you weren't content with mediocrity, it was because you were ungrateful, not because you had the potential to achieve greatness. So the Sigma male started second-guessing himself. Maybe they're right, he thought. Maybe I am asking for too much. Maybe I should just be happy with what's here. The irony is, the very people who crushed their dreams were the same ones who believed they were doing it out of love, out of protection even. They didn't want the Sigma male to get hurt or disappointed, so they pushed him back into the box they had created for him. But what they didn't understand is that crushing a dream doesn't protect anyone from pain. It just ensures that a person stays stuck in a life that isn't theirs, trapped by the limiting beliefs of others. Eventually, the Sigma male learns to silence his dreams in front of those who can't understand them. He learns to hold his ambitions close, hidden from the prying eyes of a world that seems to want to put him in a box. But deep down, he knows. His dreams are still there, burning quietly, waiting for the right moment to rise, no matter how many times they've been crushed. That quiet rebellion, that refusal to settle, is what keeps him striving for something more, even when the world insists it's out of his reach. And someday he'll realize that the real, unrealistic thing was not his dreams. It was believing that someone else's version of reality had to be his. Number 9, praise was a currency that came with strings. As a kid, when Sigma males heard praise, it was never free. It always came with an invisible price tag, a string attached that was easy to miss at first, but impossible to ignore once they grew older. "We're so proud of you" was always followed by an unspoken but very clear addendum: "as long as you do exactly what we expect next." The praise wasn't about who they were or what they'd achieved in their own right. It was about maintaining a certain performance. If they played their part, followed the rules, kept things running smoothly, they'd receive validation. But that praise wasn't unconditional. It was transactional, a currency given only when they conformed to the narrow confines of what others thought was acceptable. The message behind this was clear. You are only worth praising when you fit into a mold, when you meet the expectations, when you please the people who have set the rules for you, when they did well in school, performed well in extracurriculars, or kept their emotional worlds hidden from others. Praise was generously given. But any time they stepped out of line, questioned authority, or showed too much of their real self, that praise evaporated, replaced by disappointment, frustration, or even outright rejection. It wasn't about their achievements, it was about staying in the lines that were drawn for them. This kind of validation created a toxic loop. The Sigma male learned that to earn love and respect, they had to be perfect, not for their own sake, but for the sake of others' expectations. They grew up believing that their worth was tied to performance, that who they were wasn't enough unless they met a specific standard set by someone else. Praise was a reward for obedience, not for authentic expression. Over time, the cost of this kind of praise became clearer. It suffocated their individuality, turned them into a person always performing for an external audience rather than growing into who they were meant to be. As adults, Sigma males may be reluctant to accept praise at all, because deep down they associate it with the strings that come with it. They might brush off compliments or deflect attention, not out of arrogance, but because they've learned the hard way that approval is just a temporary illusion, something that will always vanish the moment they stop playing the game. They don't want to risk losing themselves again in a performance that isn't theirs. And while they may crave genuine validation, they'll never forget the way praise was once wielded as a tool to control, to demand conformity, and to diminish their worth unless they followed a script that wasn't theirs to begin with. Number 10. They experienced loneliness surrounded by people. For Sigma males, loneliness doesn't require physical isolation. In fact, it's often most intense when they're surrounded by people. They could be in a room full of friends, family, or colleagues, but the isolation they feel is deeper than physical space. It's the kind of loneliness that creeps in because despite being surrounded, they aren't truly seen. No one notices the depths of their thoughts, the struggles they wrestle with in silence, or the dreams they've hidden away for fear of judgment. They're surrounded by people, but none of them understand the real person beneath the surface. And that's the kind of loneliness that breaks you down slowly in ways that are almost impossible to explain. Imagine standing in a crowd, laughing, talking, participating, yet feeling like a ghost. No one knows what you're really thinking. No one cares to ask what keeps you awake at night or what motivates you to push forward when everyone else seems content to drift through life. They only see the surface, the mask they've learned to wear to survive in a world that doesn't have the patience to understand the complexity of who they really are. The real thoughts, the raw emotions, the big ideas, they remain trapped inside like a well-guarded secret no one even knows to look for. It's not that Sigma males want attention or need validation, they just crave understanding. The kind of understanding that comes from someone who sees past the exterior and recognizes the battle fought in silence. But too often, they find themselves surrounded by people who are more interested in their performance than the person they actually are. They don't need more people, they need real connection. And the sad irony is that despite being constantly surrounded, they're often the most alone. This loneliness isn't loud. It doesn't scream for attention. Instead, it's the quiet kind that wears away at your soul over time. It's the kind that leaves you questioning whether anyone could ever truly understand you, or if it's even worth trying to let them in. It's the kind of loneliness that doesn't come from the absence of people, but from the absence of genuine connection. And for Sigma males, that kind of isolation can be a silent, suffocating force that shapes the way they move through the world, often leaving them wondering if the person they truly are will ever be seen at all. Number 11, their silence was mistaken for consent. When Sigma males stayed quiet, people took it as a green light to keep pushing, keep disrespecting, keep piling on more nonsense, because they didn't lash out, cry, or throw public fits. Everyone around them thought, well, he must be okay with it. But inside, that silence wasn't consent. It was survival. It was the sound of someone choosing not to waste energy on people who clearly didn't care about understanding him anyway. Every time they swallowed a rude comment, unfair rule, or outright betrayal, they weren't forgetting it. They were stacking it brick by brick into a private wall no one could climb over again. Sigma males figured out early that speaking up often led to nowhere, or worse, punishment. Defending themselves just opened the door to more drama, more gaslighting, more "you're overreacting," and stop being so sensitive. So instead they did something far more dangerous. They internalized it all and started planning their exits in complete silence. By the time anyone realized there was a problem, the Sigma male had already emotionally packed his bags and was 3 steps out the door, mentally if not physically. That's the thing people never get until it's too late. Sigma males won't give you 20 warnings. They won't throw dramatic ultimatums. They will endure quietly until the day they decide they're done. And when that day comes, there are no second chances, no negotiations, no heartfelt apologies that can undo the damage. Their silence was never acceptance. It was the slow, careful drawing of a line that once crossed could never be uncrossed. Over time, this habit of silent endurance turns into a superpower and a curse. They're able to stay composed in situations that would wreck most people, but it also makes it nearly impossible for them to trust new people easily. Deep down, they still carry the lesson life beat into them. If you show weakness, people take advantage. If you stay quiet, they leave you alone until you disappear altogether. So that legendary Sigma detachment everyone sees, it's not aloofness, it's not arrogance, it's the battle armor of someone who was repeatedly mistaken as fine, when inside, they were quietly plotting their escape from everything and everyone who couldn't be bothered to see them properly. Number 12. Their curiosity was treated as a threat. For Sigma males, curiosity wasn't a cute childhood trait that got nurtured. It was treated like a ticking time bomb. Every time they asked why or poked at the cracks in the stories they were being fed, they weren't met with excitement or even patience. They were slapped down, told to shut it off, told that questioning things was disrespectful, dangerous, or just plain annoying. They learned early that around the wrong people, curiosity wasn't a doorway to knowledge. It was an invitation for punishment. It's not that they thought they were better than anyone, they just genuinely wanted to understand. But asking too many questions made adults uncomfortable. It exposed gaps in logic, contradictions in rules, hypocrisies they wanted hidden. And people don't like being held under a microscope, especially by a kid who can see through their act better than they can themselves. So instead of rewarding the Sigma male's hunger to learn, people shamed it, ridiculed it, or labeled it arrogance. They were made to feel like their minds were dangerous simply for working the way they were meant to. Over time, that does something brutal to a person. It teaches them that thinking differently will cost them relationships. It tells them that being curious makes them unlovable, difficult, a burden. So they stop sharing their real thoughts. They stop asking out loud. They don't kill their curiosity. They just hide it deep inside where no one can tamper with it again. They become self-taught, self-driven, quietly obsessed with figuring things out on their own because experience taught them that nobody around them could be trusted with the full power of their mind. And that's why today, Sigma males seem so detached from the noise everyone else gets caught up in. They're operating on an inner world that's sharp, vast, and wildly independent. A mind that learned how to grow without needing permission. But under all that cool-headed independence is the leftover sting of a kid who once got punished for simply wanting to know more. Their mind became a crime scene not because they broke anything, but because they dared to ask the questions everyone else was too scared to even think about. In the end, the childhood trauma of Sigma males isn't just a collection of experiences or moments from their past. It's a quiet force that shapes who they become, how they move through the world, and how they connect with others, or sometimes how they don't. It's not the visible scars that define them, but the invisible ones. The ones that lie deep within, sometimes buried so far beneath the surface that even they forget about them until something triggers the pain. pulling them back into a past they've tried to outrun. They carry a heavy understanding that in a world obsessed with conformity and validation, their true selves will often remain unseen, their dreams often misunderstood, and their pain ignored. But rather than being crushed by it, Sigma males learn to adapt, to survive, to thrive in silence, even if it means building walls around the very parts of themselves that others might never truly appreciate. They've mastered the art of being okay in their own solitude, even when that solitude is shared with others who can't see beyond the surface. Yet beneath it all, they are quietly resilient. The very traits that were born out of their trauma, their ability to think independently, their deep sense of self-awareness, their reluctance to seek approval, are also what make them incredibly strong. And while the world may never fully understand the weight they carry, there's an undeniable beauty in how they navigate life. Sigma males don't need the world to see them in the way they wish to be seen. They've learned to see themselves clearly enough to walk their path, regardless of who's watching. They've been shaped by the trauma of their childhood, yes, but they've also transformed it into a unique strength that allows them to rise above, to carve their own path, and to remain true to themselves, even when the world expects conformity. And in that quiet defiance, in their refusal to be anything other than exactly who they are, lies a power few will ever understand. If you found this insight into the trauma and resilience of Sigma males as thought-provoking as we intended, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more deep dives into the hidden dynamics of extraordinary individuals. If this resonated with you, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment with your thoughts, or share it with someone who might just need to hear it. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue to bring you the content that challenges the status quo. So go ahead, join the conversation, and let's keep pushing the boundaries of understanding together.